Hey, history buffs and mystery lovers. Ever heard of a leader who died in 1924 but still rules from a glass box? That's Vladimir Lenin for you. He had a massive stroke, and his body has been perfectly preserved on public display in Moscow for nearly a century. Meanwhile, his brain was sliced into thousands of pieces in a bizarre quest to find the source of his genius. Today, we're diving deep into the strange tale of the Red Mummy, exploring the secrets of his corpse and the curse that might haunt it. Let's get into it. The year is 1922. Lenin, the architect of the Soviet Union, suffers his first stroke. While he lingers for another 2 years, the power struggle has already begun. The Kremlin becomes a hotbed of intrigue and whispers. Who will succeed him? The brilliant but arrogant Leon Trotsky, or the cunning and underestimated Joseph Stalin? Lenin, partially paralyzed and unable to speak clearly, can only watch as his comrades plot and position themselves for the inevitable power vacuum. In his final testament, he warns against Stalin, calling him too rude and urging the party to remove him. But his words go unheeded. When Lenin finally dies in January 1924, Stalin is perfectly placed to seize control, setting the stage for decades of brutal rule. It's a classic tale of betrayal and ambition, played out in the shadowy corridors of the Kremlin. But Lenin's death wasn't the end of his story. In many ways, it was just the beginning. Stalin, ever the master of propaganda, saw an opportunity. Instead of a traditional burial, he decreed that Lenin's body should be preserved for all time, turning the revolutionary leader into a quasi-religious icon for the new atheist state. This was a monumental task. The top scientists in the Soviet Union were summoned for an unprecedented project to halt the natural process of decay indefinitely. The first attempts were frantic. They tried freezing the body, but it caused skin discoloration. They needed a new method, and fast. The solution came from two chemists, Vladimir Lenin and Boris Spassky. They developed a unique embalming cocktail, a secret blend of chemicals including glycerol and potassium acetate. It wasn't about mummification in the ancient Egyptian sense, which just dries out the body. This was something different. They had to create a system that would keep the corpse flexible, moist, and looking lifelike. The process was incredibly invasive. They made incisions all over the body to infuse the tissues with the solution, bathed the corpse in special baths, and even replaced his eyeballs with glass prosthetics to maintain their shape. It was a macabre, scientific ritual. This wasn't a one-and-done procedure. To this day, maintaining Lenin's body is a full-time job. A dedicated team of scientists, known as the Mausoleum Group, works in a lab right underneath the Red Square tomb. Every couple of years, the mausoleum closes, and Lenin's body is taken down to the lab for a touch-up. They rebathe him in the chemical solutions, check for any signs of mold or drying, and even have a custom-made suit ready to replace the old one. This ongoing maintenance has kept him looking remarkably well preserved for a man who has been dead for a century. It's a testament to Soviet science, but also a deeply strange and costly endeavor, especially in post-Soviet Russia. While one team was working to preserve Lenin's body, another group was tasked with an even stranger mission, dissecting his brain to find the physical source of his revolutionary genius. The Soviet government was desperate to prove that Lenin's brilliance was a biological fact, a material product of his superior brain structure. They established a special brain institute in Moscow for this very purpose. The man chosen to lead this bizarre quest was a prominent German neuroscientist, Oscar Vogt. He was brought to Moscow with a singular goal: analyze Lenin's brain and unlock its secrets. This was no simple task. The process was meticulous and, honestly, pretty gruesome. They carefully removed Lenin's brain and sliced it into more than 30,000 incredibly thin sections. Each tiny slice was then mounted on a glass slide, stained, and examined under a microscope. Vogt and his team spent years poring over these slides, comparing them to the brains of other individuals, both ordinary people and other notable figures. They were looking for anything unusual, any anatomical feature that could explain Lenin's intellect. After years of study, Vogt announced his finding. He claimed that the pyramidal cells in the third layer of Lenin's cerebral cortex were unusually large and numerous. He argued this was the biological substrate of Lenin's associative thinking, in other words, the source of his genius. Of course, this conclusion has been heavily criticized. Many scientists today argue that you see endless complex traits like genius to simple anatomical features. The brain is far too complex. Was it genuine science? Or was it just political propaganda designed to legitimize the Soviet regime? The institute also studied the brains of other famous Soviets, like the writer Maxim Gorky and even Stalin himself, creating a pantheon of genius brains. The whole project highlights the strange intersection of science and ideology in the Soviet Union, a desperate attempt to find a material basis for their political faith. But the story gets even stranger. As the decades passed, a dark legend began to form around Lenin's tomb, the curse of the mummy. Whispers and rumors spread that those who disturbed or disrespected the revolutionary leader's final or not so final resting place would meet a grim fate. The evidence? A string of mysterious deaths and misfortunes that befell leaders who had close encounters with Lenin's corpse. For example, some stories connect the deaths of several Soviet officials who oversaw the mausoleum to this supposed curse. Coincidence? Absolutely. But the human mind loves to find patterns, especially when they involve power, death, and the supernatural. The most famous victim of the curse is often said to be Ho Chi Minh, the leader of North Vietnam. In 1969, Soviet experts who had worked on Lenin's body were sent to Hanoi to help embalm Ho Chi Minh after his death. The tale goes that many of these experts met with untimely ends shortly after. Other stories link the downfall of various political figures to their visits to the mausoleum. Of course, there's no real evidence for any of this. It's classic folklore, a spooky story that adds another layer of myth to Lenin's already complex legacy. It plays on our primal fears about disturbing the dead and the idea that powerful figures can exert influence even from beyond the grave. Is it a real curse, or just a collection of coincidences and Cold War propaganda? You be the judge. So here we are, 100 years later, and Lenin's body is still there in Red Square. It's a bizarre relic of a bygone era, a tourist attraction, and a subject of intense debate in Russia. Should he finally be buried? Many, including the Russian Orthodox Church, say yes. They argue it's unnatural and unchristian to keep a corpse on display like a museum piece. Others argue he's a part of history, and the mausoleum should be preserved as a reminder of the Soviet past, for better or for worse. The debate touches on Russia's identity and how it should reckon with its communist legacy. What do you think? Is it time to finally lay Lenin to rest, or should the Red Mummy continue his silent watch over Moscow? The question of what to do with Lenin's body is really a question of what to do with his legacy. From a stroke that created a power vacuum, to a macabre embalming ritual, a scientific hunt for genius, and a spooky curse, the story of Lenin's corpse is one of the weirdest chapters of the 20th century. It's a perfect storm of science, politics, and myth. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of Soviet history. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to Nation History for more deep dives into the strangest stories from around the world. Let me know in the comments. Bury him or keep him. See you next time.